friends, welcome back or welcome if you're new here. My name is Stacy and I am the Chapter Conundrum. And in today's video, we're going to be going over my 2025 reading goals, how I did with them, and talking about what my reading goals for 2026 are. So in 2025, I had some pretty ambitious goals, and some of them I smashed, others I completely failed at. So let's go ahead and talk about it. The first one was to just straight up read 100 books. And I got quite busy last year, so I only ended up managing to read 95. But you know what? I'm not angry about that. That's still a decent amount considering how much else I had on the go last year. And I feel like it's close enough to where like I at least made reading intentional. The second goal I had, I didn't really attach a number to, but I wanted to make sure that I read some of my 5-star predictions. So a while back, I think in 2024 actually, I put out a 5-star predictions video, and on there I had 12 books. So I'm happy to say that I have read 3 of them, and I've also read an additional 5-star prediction, which was not a part of that video. So I feel like reading 4 of my 5-star predictions is pretty solid for me, especially since that is something I usually struggle with. I tend to put off books I know I'm going to love until I'm like in the optimal mood for them. So the fact that I read 4 of them is pretty good. My next goal was simple. It was just to read some of my owned TBR. I didn't attach a number to this one either. And I did actually look at and tally. So I read 29 books that were on my physical TBR. I did read more books that we own physically, but they were like Jake's books. They're staying here regardless. They didn't really put a dent in our shelf space or like my overall count of unread physical TBR, so I'm not counting those. But 29, I feel like is still solid. I'm hoping I can go a little bit higher than that next year, but I'm not mad about accomplishing 29. That's more than 2 a month, and it's almost a third of the overall reading I did, so that's not terrible. My next goal, I did have a specific number attached to, and that was to read at least 10 of my anticipated 2025 releases. And I'm happy to say that I completely smashed this one. I read 16 2025 releases that I was anticipating. So I blew this one out of the water, and I'm glad because this is an area that I have struggled with in the past. Like I know in 2023 and 2024, I didn't really read my anticipated releases in a timely manner. So I'm happy to say that in 2025, I definitely made that a priority. My next goal for 2025 was to make heavy use of my Everend account before it got switched to the legacy model. So mine is actually still billed through my Canadian billing. I never did change it because the US switched models to a credit model, which I wasn't a fan of. So I just left it. And at this point, the Canadian Everend has access to both models still. So I just haven't upgraded to the new model, and I'm keeping my legacy account for now. I did managed to read, I think, 7 books on Everend last year, so not a ton, but Jake also made use of my Everend account. So I think all in all, we read at least 1 book on there every month between the two of us, which isn't terrible. But I also feel like that's not necessarily enough to justify keeping the subscription long term. I used to use Everend a whole lot more than that. So if I find that I'm not making heavy use of it in the first couple months of 2025, even if I'm not forced into the credit model, I'm definitely going to be canceling that. The other part of that goal was to kind of like look at my Everend save list and figure out where I could potentially access some of the books on there if I did end up being forced into the new model and canceling. And I'm happy to say that this I smashed as well. Jake and I did kind of a little local road trip around and got a few local library cards that were free for state residents, but you just had to go in person to get a library card. And so I think at this point, between that and online applications we were able to do without having to go in person, I have like 7 local library cards. And so between those libraries, a lot of what was on my Everend save list is available now through my Libby or Hoopla. So I'm happy to say that I at least don't have a lot left on my Everend save list that I feel like is going to be high priority. Like if I canceled it tomorrow, there would be a few things that would kind of be left high and dry, sure, but it's not something I couldn't potentially foresee me spending Audible credits on in the future or putting on my wish list to get a physical copy instead. So I at least made the effort to acquire library cards and look up my save list on those libraries to see what they had. So my next one I didn't do so well at, but I knew that setting this goal was going to be a little bit difficult because having it in tandem with reading more physical books on my TBR, where a lot of them are starts in series, was going to be challenging. And I've basically already given away that it's how many ongoing series I had. So I had a goal to end 2025 with less than 25 ongoing series. That didn't happen. I am sitting at 32. And I think going into 2025, I was at 27. So while it has gone up, I don't feel like it's gone up egregiously. And I did actually read a lot of physical books on my shelves. A lot of them starts in series. Even in December, I think I started like 3 new series that I read physical books for. So I'm not mad about not meeting this one. I'm just glad that I'm not in the middle of like 60 series again. This next one, I just think I thought was going to be a good idea at the time, but I made zero effort to track how I did with it in 2025. And because of that, I almost forgot that it was a reading goal and completely failed at this one. And it was to read at least half the books that I intentionally hauled last year. So I wasn't going to count books that Jake brought me home from the Little Free Library or that my sister passed to me from her unhaul. I was more specifically going to be counting this towards books I was gifted that I had on my wish list, or that I directly purchased either through a used book sale, through gift cards, or whatever. And I actually went back and watched all of my book hauls, and I am counting Christmas 2024 haul in the 2025 hauls because I'm not counting Christmas 2025 in that haul because I feel like you got to count Christmas the year before in order to have the opportunity to read that. But anyway, that's a tangent. I ended up hauling 47 books in those categories that were either gifted or that I directly purchased. And I read a whopping 6 of them. So that is pretty sad. I mean, I would have had to read like what, 23, 24 to meet that goal. And I read like a quarter of that. So that was pretty dismal. I do feel like I will naturally do better at this in 2026 just because I'm going to be prioritizing my physical books a whole lot more. So I am a little bit disappointed that I failed this one so badly, but also I know that it's not going to be that bad moving forward. And then my final goal for 2025 was to not get behind on my buddy reads and read alongs and to limit myself to only committing to doing 4 of them at a time. So while I did limit myself to only doing 4 at a time, I still fell behind because of life and just how busy and crazy things got at times. So I'm definitely going to make a better effort with that moving forward in 2026. But I at least can say that I was very disciplined in limiting myself to how many I signed up for because historically I haven't been. So I am showing improvement at least, even if I didn't meet that one. So that said, I definitely managed to completely fail and also smash some of my different reading goals for 2025. I do feel like a big product of that is just that I read less than I typically would in 2025. Like typically I'm somebody who reads more like 120, 130 books in a year and typically longer books as well. But last year I only read 95. I haven't actually looked at the overall page count for what I read last year, but I would predict that it's like dismal in comparison to what I have read in previous years, even though the book count isn't like that much less. But in 2026, I am prioritizing reading time more. I think going forward, I'd like to try and have a bit more of a routine where I set aside a certain time of the day to read every day. Now, while it's not always going to be feasible, at least if I'm making the attempt, I feel like more reading will happen because I am somebody who tends to do things when I'm in the mood to do them. And a lot of the time, once I start a task or a task in a certain vein, I'll just spiral and keep going through my list and doing it all. And it leads to me being really tired and just not having enough time for myself sometimes. So that's something I'm going to try and be better at this year, is just like being okay with accomplishing what I've started and not feeling like I have to tackle the entire list every time. That it's okay to have things on a to-do list that stay on the list until you get there. That you don't have to just keep going until your list is totally done every single time. I mean, there are going to be times when obviously it's going to feel good to just smash out that last thing on the list, or where I'm going to want to like binge a whole bunch of other things. But for the most part, I think just having a bit of a better balance between doing those things is going to feel good. So moving on to my 2026 goals, I definitely would still like to maintain the goal of reading 100 books this year. I do think it's feasible. I feel like I could have hit 100 had I been paying attention to where I was at and just smashed out like some novellas and graphic novels in December, but I just honestly wasn't looking at it at all. And I came close even though I was like super busy and had a ton going on last year. So I definitely feel like 100 is feasible if I'm trying. So I'm keeping that one. Then instead of necessarily focusing on 5-star predictions, which I probably will still end up picking a few of them up, I definitely want to make sure I prioritize some of the other challenges I've set for myself. So things like my 26 books to read in 2026, and my 1 to 10 TBR challenge, and also the 2026 Discord reading challenge. I think in 2025 I ended up like missing out finishing it by 2 prompts. So that's a little bit sad, but also like I'm not mad about having 50 books completed towards a challenge. Like that's still pretty good, especially considering that I just read a lot less than I normally would. But in early 2027, I don't want to be sitting here realizing I missed out by like 1 or 2 books in finishing it. So I definitely want to finish it this year. I definitely want to make sure I'm continuing to read more of my own TBR. And I'm going to say that I want to read more of it than I did last year. So last year I did 29 books off my physical TBR. This year I want to do 30 or more. I feel like I have built up some momentum in working towards that now, so I'm hoping that can continue. And as part of that, I actually want to get back to actually physically reading a little bit more. I tend to rely on audiobooks a ton these days, so I am going to set myself a goal of actually physically reading 20 books. And I have a little bookmark that has like 20 slots that I'm going to track that on. Once again, I want to try and be intentional about keeping up with the planned read-alongs and limiting how many I take part in. So I definitely don't want any more than 5 planned reads in a month. So that's going to include read-alongs, buddy reads, anything like that. I want to have some space for mood reading and being able to pick up library loans or things on Everend or to jump into things that I'm in the mood for them, because I have all these books that I'm waiting until I'm in the optimal mood for, but then I am so busy with planned TBR that even when I'm in the mood for them, I'm not picking them up. So if I make more space for mood reading, that will naturally kind of lend itself to my other goals of reading my physical TBR and in reading some of the books that I'm really excited for. And I think the only other goal I want to set for myself this year is to haul less books this year than I did last year. So I definitely am feeling like our shelves are at capacity. We don't have a lot more space for new books. I mean, we have some books that kind of like live on the tops of other books. We have a lot stacked sideways in order to make things fit. There are a couple shelves that have like books tucked in the back behind the other books that you can't see and that we can't display because they don't fit. So if I'm reading more of the books we own and I'm hauling less books, hopefully that will feel a little bit more reasonable by the end of this year. But yeah, that is all for the goals I have for myself reading wise in 2026. Definitely let me know down below in the comments what are some of your 2026 reading goals and how did you do with your 2025 goals? Did you smash them? Did you fail them? Did you have like a mixture of smash and fail like I did? Are you somebody who tends to be very, very intentional with your goal setting, or do you just kind of think like, oh, that sounds good, I want to try and work on that? I feel like I'm kind of the latter, but that I will also hold myself accountable to keep trying and not give up. So at least I have that going for me. But as always, thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe on your way out if you want to, and have a great day. Bye.